Nation.
Region Review.
The Raging Cajuns will be a source of pride for this university, for the alumni, fans, and donors as we achieve success in the classroom, in the competitive arena, and in the community.
It's about to get really fun.
We're looking for dudes that will stand up. Well, Coach, let me tell you today, I'm here and I'm ready to stand up. And I challenge you, Raging Cajun Nation, to stand up with us. Stand up with us. Let's lock hand in hand and let's walk through the gates of Omaha.
Hey, I love y'all boys. Let's grind every day starting today. Let's do it. Y'all ready? Alert! Alert! Ready! Who's that team ready? Who's that team ready? That's up!
I got one thing to say right here. Cajuns win!
Comments, calls, etc. Welcome. We'll get to the comments towards the end of the show. But boys, before we do that, a few thank yous and shout outs we'd like to give. I would personally like to say thank you to Ryan and Tracy over at Mid-City for taking care of us last Wednesday, right before the Cajuns game. Had a couple of drinks, had some appetizers. They had the outstanding specials that they run on Wednesdays are unbeatable. So wanted to give Mid-City Smokehouse a shout out at the top of the show. It's been a good week. A little bit of opportunity to stretch the legs, some Saturday opportunity with no stress, just watching the league, watching some big games, watching a former coach here playing a game that was a very interesting game. So lots to talk about. But to get started, just want to say hello to the boys. Haven't had an opportunity to speak too much. Gentlemen, floor is yours.
I wouldn't say it was not stressful. I mean, the Astros did play a 47-inning 38-hour game the other night, Saturday. But other than that, I agree with you. It was nice to kind of take a breath from college football, let other teams, go at it, beat each other, or whatever. So we saw Billy's boys not do so hot this weekend. But again, there was no heartbreak on my end in college football. So I guess all is good in the world.
It was nice. It was nice to kind of sit back and enjoy some good college football. And there were really some epic finishes in quite a few games. Whether it was in the Sun Belt or just just random games. I got to watch that Alabama-Tennessee showdown back and forth. USC and Utah was a good finish. Had the chance to watch the beatdown of the Monarchs of ODU against COVID Carolina, which was a beautiful sight to behold. I think most of the conference fans outside of the coastal fan base were pretty happy to see that. I really enjoyed watching, believe it or not, that Southern Miss Arkansas State finish. That was a lot of fun because, of course, both of those teams are our two future opponents in the next 10 days or so. So overall, just a great weekend of college football. Of course, the Saints, disappointing again on Sunday. But to Nick's point, I'm also a Stros fan. Stros on their way to the ALCS, battling the Yankees. So hopefully third time's a charm. They take care of business once again against the Yankees and head to another World Series. So overall, it's just a fun Saturday of fun weekend of sports, man. Just a fun weekend of sports.
Yeah, so the Guardians ended up taking care of business, or the Yanks took care of
Yankees.
Oh gosh, what a proud franchise! And look, I don't care what you call yourself, but the Guardians, is that really what we settled on? How did that? It's like the Commanders is bad, but it's not as bad as the Guardians. That's pretty bad. So anyway, the Yankees had to win that game. We can't have something called the Guardians winning a World Series. It's just I don't even want to go there. I know that's probably a whole topic over there. But go Stros. I'm not a Stros fan, but happy for all you guys. It's fun. Baseball is more fun, it seems like, over the last 10 years when the Astros are relevant, because so many people around here are pumped up about Major League Baseball. So that's cool. I know Jerry probably has a comment about that.
No, one thing I enjoy about the playoffs is I like the fact that they've expanded a little bit. They've widened the series of the wild card. You're not just getting these one play-in games. I kind of like that. It's added a little more fun. It makes it more fun. More fan bases get to experience it. And look, I'm not for the everybody wins a trophy motto, but I do think the MLB playoff format, the way they've done it, they did it right. So I'm excited about it. I'm curious to see if the Astros can hold on. I mean, they are due for another World Series, not to sound too spoiled, but they do have the team to do it. And I look forward to the next week or so. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. But outside of that, look, we got a game to play on Saturday, and we've got a big showdown in the Sun Belt on Thursday night that has a lot to do with us. So that's what I'm looking forward to first before anything else.
Yeah, believe it or not, we actually showed up tonight to talk about the Cajuns. So we'll get into that. Before we do, back by popular demand and actually several requests, which was humbling, the Rainbow Mermaids updates. I haven't been able to give them because we've been off, but I got to tell you guys, Coach Jag had a really tough weekend this past weekend. Both teams struggled on the pitch. Start with the Fire Boys. Guys didn't get it done, man. We just got out-aggressive. We got out-hustled. Now, the ambassador, which, by the way, if people don't know who the ambassador is, I know I say the ambassador often. My son, Owen, is our ambassador. He's always wearing the Rage and Review gear, so we call him the ambassador. The ambassador is kind of the star of his team, right? So I got to pull the reins back sometimes. But the ambassador was unleashed on Saturday. But he had 4 goals, should have been 6. He also stopped 3 goals. He was just a monster all over the place. But the rest of the team, you know, it was a little bit hot last weekend. I know we're all enjoying this gumbo weather right now, but last weekend, humidity had returned on Saturday. It wasn't a good time. They didn't want to be there. You know, lots of whining. Where's my mom? One of the kids had hot soda for water or for drink instead of water. It was a tough scene. Big Cat showed up. The ambassador showed up, but unfortunately, the rest of the Fire Boys, you know, they left their lunch pail at home. So we lost a heartbreaker. Actually, Big Cat had an opportunity to tie the game as the whistle sounded, but it just skated right by the far post. So we ended up falling 5-4 to a team that the guy never told me the name of their team. He was a little bit of a, well, I'll be careful because he might be a listener. So, but wasn't the nicest guy. But we lost.
I heard that you got a little bit out coached last weekend, but I mean, that's just word on the street. I wasn't there.
No, you're not wrong. So my girls go in, so we're 5-1 on the year, or excuse me, 4-1 on the year. We go into the team that we've already beaten, and we beat them pretty soundly. We go in there, and, you know, it's hot. Again, it's hot on Sunday. We play on Sunday. It's hot. We go in there. We were down one of our motor players, one of our effort players, Addie. She's an absolute killer out there. She never stops. She was out. So we had to, we had to kind of make a different plan this weekend, and I dropped the ball. You know, I got a little bit arrogant. I thought we could play some of our weaker players in the second quarter. Thought we could really go with a weaker lineup and gear up for the second half. Well, unfortunately, the other team, also Mermaids, not Rainbow Mermaids, but Mermaids, they went out and scored 4 goals in that clip, in that quarter. So got absolutely smoked in the second quarter, could not recover. Rainbow Mermaids go down 6-1. So tough scene for Coach Jag, really a learning experience for me. I got to be better. So we just actually got off the pitch. We just finished practice, and we ran and we scrimmaged, and we had a good sweat out there, even though it was like 40 degrees. We did well. It was good. Had a good hour with the girls. I think we really came together as a team. So we'll seize the opportunity to get better, guys. I mean, that's what you do, right? You come together as a team, you get better. So that's what we're gonna do.
I mean, Coach, you got to let the girls know how to handle adversity. I mean, it's never too early to start, right? I mean, when your back's against the wall, what do? I mean, you got to let the girls know, you know.
It's sink or swim, Jerry. It's sink or swim.
Thank you. That's right. So, yeah. I mean, I think the future looks bright. I think you'll get it figured out, Coach. You got this.
Andy, I appreciate that, and I fully expect a bounce back performance from the girls this weekend. But look, adversity is a good thing. You know, everybody's a fan when things are going well. It's who your real players are when times are tough. So we're going to come out. We're going to play our best game on Saturday. I believe it. Speaking it into existence.
I'm seeing some parallelisms here, Coach.
I like it.
Of Ridge and Review as far as the Cajuns go. So it's a good lesson. You live and you learn, right?
That's it. You know.
Oh, Cat, dude said parallelisms.
Parallelisms.
Parallelisms. You like that, huh?
Jerry, tell them what the real words are.
I don't know. I just threw it out there.
We'll just go with parallels, just for fun.
Parallelisms. Did I just say that? I did say that.
Hey, man, look, the game is all about life lessons, right? You learn the life lessons on the pitch, on the football field, on the basketball court, wherever. It's all about the life lessons. So I'm looking to see my girls bounce back this weekend, much like we've seen the Cajuns bounce back over the last week and get the ship righted, go into Marshall, tough-fought victory. I wanted to start here with Marshall thoughts. I know that when we got on with Thundercast Pod, we had some going into the game, we didn't know what to expect. We made our opinions based on what we saw. Obviously, we weren't completely right, weren't completely wrong. I kind of wanted to just go around the horn and talk about what we said leading up to the game and how it actually played out. Nick, I'm going to start with you based on you were a little bit more neutral than Jerry and I. Jerry was a little bit more pro-Cajun. I was a little bit more pessimistic. You felt like, yeah, we had a chance. Did we necessarily have the upper hand? Maybe not. It was going to be a tough road game. This was one of the teams that we circled on the schedule that maybe looked like a loss before the season kicked. Based on how you felt going into the game, how do you think we performed, and what is your lasting impression of that game?
Yeah, I feel like they did what I said they had to do, and that was a lot of things. We had to pin them back on special teams. We had to contain the run game. We had to take what they gave us offensively, and Ben had to perform well as a starting quarterback, and he did that on his first start, which was very impressive. So I thought it would be a little bit closer. I know they had that trash touchdown later in the game, but for all intents and purposes, we dominated them in the second half of that game. It might be some lightning juju shaws that they have now, lightning delay, whatever stuff they have going. But I'll take it, man. And Ben impressed me this weekend. Now, I think he grew up as a quarterback. I think he grew up as a starting quarterback, and we're going to touch on what we feel about quarterbacking going forward later on. But I thought that everything that we had to do to beat Marshall, look, the thing that scared me the most was a run game. And when I saw we were stuffing him in their run game and we were containing them and they had a couple of long passes our secondary allowed, but then again, we were getting held most of the night. So I was pleasantly surprised by our performance. I wasn't, blown away by it. I think going back and watching it for a second time and having a few less drinks when I watch it, there was some room for improvement, of course, on coaching and play. But I really do think, again, they did everything that I thought they had to do, including putting pressure on Columbia. I thought that was a big key to the game because they give up sacks, and they did that. And so I thought it was a really good job overall by the whole team. It was a team effort. And like I said, pleasantly surprised by the outcome. I thought it would be a little bit closer, but happy to see what they did.
Yeah, I was a little more optimistic after what I saw against South Alabama. I thought our defense played lights out against South Alabama to where they kept us in the game. And everybody talks about that last minute touchdown drive, but I think without the defense, that game's a lot worse than what the score indicated. So I cut them some slack a little bit there. I thought our offense didn't play as well in that game. This time around, I think when I look at the Marshall game, going into the Marshall game, what I was optimistic about was the fact that the defense can stop the run game. And that's kind of what Marshall's bread and butter was. I was proven right when I saw it the other night, and I was actually more surprised about the fact that they couldn't really throw the ball too well. I was actually a little shocked. I thought they were a little more balanced. And I thought the fact that they ran the ball aggressively and just kept giving the rock to their running back, it played right into our hands. And also we won the field position battle. That was huge going into that game. Nick, you had mentioned it going in, we need to win the field position battle. The part that really surprised me was the fact that we opened up the offense with a good passing game. And as I've always said, Ben Wooldridge is a pocket passer, and we let him sling it up and down the field. Not to mention, everybody touched the football. Meagle touched the football. LeBlanc touched the football. Jefferson touched the football. Rogers touched the football. Fleming, Johnson, Williams, Washington, all of them touched the football. And I thought that was really important because the fact that we were able to spread the field really helped our offense be able to kind of sustain drives. Like I said, they didn't get as many 3-and-outs, and helping out with that, not to mention the fact that we not only moved the ball, but when we got in scoring position and couldn't get into the end zone, you had Kenny Almendaris look like a Lou Groza Award candidate and just drilled those 3 field goals, which was huge in a low-scoring game like that. So just overall, I had a feeling we could win that game. I didn't think we would dominate as much as we did, but I think this was the game that I think all of our fan base, all of Cajun Nation knew this was a team that we've been waiting for all year. And it was so nice to see it. I know it's better late than never, but I was very happy to see it against Marshall because now we have this stretch coming up in conference play, and I think we can definitely make some things happen if we play like we did last Wednesday night.
Jerry, I want to add on to that. You were talking about Ben as a pocket passer, which I totally agree, but I looked up his stats so far this season. With one start, he's got 128 yards of rushing, and he's only had 16 yards lost. So that, to me, tells you, yes, I mean, he's a pocket passer first, but we saw against Marshall that when he needs to run the ball and he's got good eyes and good vision, when he's got to run it for a first down or he's got to pick up some yards with his legs, he will do it. So that, to me, is something that I wasn't necessarily expecting from Woolridge this season. That was good to see. Wooldridge. I'll get it right eventually this season, guys.
To your point, I was very surprised, and I don't think defenses or the Marshall defense really expected that from Ben. And not to mention, people forget, Ben is 6'4". He's like, what, 220, 225? You have somebody running at full speed at you like that. If I'm a linebacker, obviously I know they're willing to tackle, but it makes it a lot more difficult when you have a big battering ram coming your way. And he's not one of those type of quarterbacks to be finesse and run out of bounds. He's going to lower his shoulders. So I thought that was very impressive with the fact that I'll tell you this, the way he moved his feet in the pocket to me was that was the most impressive. And he's going to need that moving forward, especially this weekend against Arkansas State. I thought his pocket presence was really, really good. And not to mention, he's very patient when he makes his throws. So the big thing I'm looking forward to, and I don't want to get too ahead, but I do hope that we can establish a rushing attack, because if we do establish a rushing attack, what we saw last Wednesday night, very, very, very high potential for a high potent offense that we've all been waiting to see.
I agree. And, going into the game, we hadn't shown consistency in any part of any of the phases, any of the three phases. I mean, you can say defense has been pretty consistent, but still there had been things that you could point and complain about with regard to giving up third downs or, third and longs, or not necessarily finishing games. First of all, I thought Marshall was by far our most complete team performance. I don't think there's a question about it. I still think there's plenty of stuff we can clean up, but you look at what special teams does as a whole in that game, across the board, 1,000% better. You look at the offense. The offense wasn't fantastic by any stretch of the imagination, but they were opportunistic. They took opportunities when they were given, and they threw daggers. Ben threw daggers. Talking about Ben, and everything's been said about Ben, but I'll say this: I'm going to give Chris Lano some credit here. Crippa said it best. He said, you almost could feel that these two quarterbacks were trying to win the moment rather than trying to win the game. And I think when Ben knew that he was the guy, regardless of situation or circumstance, when he knew he was the guy, he was able to focus on managing the team, winning the game, not winning the moment, not winning the drive or the down. Like, it was a more comprehensive way that he approached his job. I think that's something that needs to be said, and I want to give Chris a shout out on that. But overall, guys, I mean, the defense finished that game. I was also very surprised that Columbi, in my view, was very slow developing. He didn't move nearly as fast as I thought he was going to be. And maybe you can attribute that to our defense. Our defense is very fast. I mean, I think we talked to Andre about this. It seemed like at times this defense started to think a little bit too much instead of just react and play. Not against Marshall. They were out there thumping. I mean, we were hitting people. We were reactionary. We were all over the ball at a moment's notice. That we were gang tackling like we used to. There wasn't many times where I felt like the defense was out of position in any way in that game. So I didn't know any of that was going to take place in the game, because all of the evidence leading up to the game didn't really tell me that. But Ben delivered in a huge way. Talk about the wide receivers who have been up and down all season. Mike Jefferson showed out. John Stevens showed up. Look at Fleming, who showed up. I mean, Dante Fleming had maybe 3 catches on the season before that game, before the Marshall game. I mean, he had some of the biggest catches of the game. So a lot of things that we were waiting on, that we knew we expected certain units to play well. And we'll talk about this a little later in the show. They showed up. So the Cajuns team that we expected to see in game 1 showed up in game 5, and that's fine. Game 6, I'm happy about it. But leading up to that game, there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of guys that weren't necessarily doing what we thought we were going to do, but I feel like the team has grown up halfway into the season. We're getting ready to bring Kara Richey in. We're going to talk some A-State. But before we do that, she's in the lobby right now. So, Nick, when I'm done reading the history, if you don't mind, just bring her in. I want to start off with a little bit of history, and I'll let Kara respond. I think she can hear us. Just want to let everybody know the history of this game, all right? If you've been around the Cajuns program the last 15, 20 years, you know how hotly contested this series has been. But just to put it in perspective, okay, the Cajuns are 13-7 in the last 20 meetings between the two schools. 11 of those games have been one-score games in which the Cajuns are 9-2. I think that's very important, especially when you look at the Red Wolves schedule and how many close games they've played in this season. And you can also say that about the Cajuns. Gus Malzahn came here and was the last opposing coach as an A-State coach to win at Cajun Field, which is wild because 2012 feels like 20 years ago. I know it's only a decade, but still it feels like a very long time ago. You remember they had that there were like 3 mega name coaches that went through that program in like a 3 or 4 year span, which was pretty wild. But the Cajuns lead the all-time season, the all-time series 25-18, and obviously we won the last 4 meetings. So a lot of these games have been hotly contested. Most of the time, the home team ends up winning the game. And as we bring on Kara, we just want to say that we'll probably see a game kind of like that again. Kara, welcome to the Rage and Review podcast. Thanks for joining. How are you tonight?
I'm good. I appreciate the invite, guys. Hope you guys are all doing well.
And thanks for being able to see us on a short notice. I know that I was able to hit you up this morning and it worked out, which is great. A lot of these recording sessions, we can only make decisions based on like a 24-hour window. Sure. Now that Jerry's got kids and I got my stuff and Nick's got his stuff. So it's been a little bit interesting this year, especially with the video. But again, thanks for joining. Very much looking forward to this matchup. You do about as good a job as there is in Jonesboro covering your team. Just want to say that. Let everybody know who you are if they don't know already. And, oh, by the way, Kara's a fantastic social media follow. So you don't follow her, go check her out. She's fantastic on social media.
I did tweet out a hot toddy recipe earlier because we're about to get into that weird type of weather where it's 70 one day and 37 the next day, and you don't really know what's going on, but your allergies go nuts. So that's probably the last thing on my timeline, but I'm at Kara_Richey. And Monday through Friday, I host a show called The Workday Red Zone on the Ticket Radio Network from noon to 2. So it focuses heavily on Arkansas State athletics, which right now means a boatload of football. And then also I do a little work on game days for A-State football as well. So I start the network pregame, and then also on home games, I wrap up the broadcast with a call-in show. So game days are busy days. Love it. Love being able to follow the team and keep tabs on the team and sucker somebody into paying me for it.
There you go. That's living the dream. I mean, somebody paying you to do something that's fun. Do what you love. That's the dream. So Kara, we'll first start with a few general questions, and we'll get a little bit into the matchup. We'll keep you for a few minutes. I don't want to infringe on your time too much, but the Butch Jones experience has been an interesting one. And I know in 2021, he basically said, stay with the process, trust the process. A lot of the same things that we went through with early Billy Napier years. Where are you at with the Butch Jones process? Do you see some real improvement, some real turnover in that program? And just overall, the feeling about Arkansas State football right now?
Well, right now, the feeling is, I'll start with the last question and kind of work our way backwards to what you said there. You kind of only feel as good or as bad as your last win or your last loss. And the last loss was brutal, which I'm sure we'll go into that here in just a few minutes, with Arkansas State kind of crumbling under the pressure and losing to Southern Miss 20-19. So I think Monday, on my show, we had a lot of callers, had a lot of feedback on that. And I think the overall mood was depressed, probably, to just sum it up in one word. So it's not exactly like a thrilled fan base right now. That being said, you can see significant progress from where this team was last year under year one with Butch Jones. And then even flashing back to the last year, the Anderson era, there were some real deficiencies with that team as well that were masked by a couple of standout players. And then once those guys were gone, they all popped up and it was like, oh no, what is this team going to be built around? So you can see it. You can see it statistically. You can see it in the talent level. You can see it in the give a damn level, if I can say that on your stream. But you can see it in so many different ways. But at the same time, it's just, when you don't see it in the win-loss column, like, nobody is patient anymore. I'm not a patient person. I can order food right now and have it show up in my house before we get done with this stream. And there's so many things in life that you just snap your finger and it happens. So watching somebody go through the build, it's difficult right now. And I think this fan base just needs to see a W somewhere.
Yeah, just real quick, you can swear on the podcast.
Okay.
It's always funny when people are reluctant to swear. I would just point them to the Bobby Hebert episode, if you guys remember. There's some really good content about. Anyway, I don't want to go too far in that. Just looking at your guys' schedule, a couple of brutal finishes. Honestly, Southern Miss is probably up there with one of the worst ones. I'm talking about if I'm watching from a fan.
Yeah.
You're up 19-7 going in. What was that, to the end of the third quarter, into the fourth quarter? You're up 2 scores still. And Southern Miss is one of those programs that are kind of in the throes of that culture change, and Will Hall's doing a whole lot of work with that roster and that program. So I don't think this is completely out of left field, but if you have that situation at home, you feel like you want to finish that, right? I mean, I don't know exactly what transpired towards the end of that game. If you want to fill us in, that'd be great. But how do you recover from that? If I'm an Arkansas State diehard, how do you recover from that?
Well, you really don't until the team is able to get a W. Like, I mean, you're just there's no way that you can talk yourself into optimism with that, because I like to think of myself as an optimist. I think I'm not quite a sunshine pumper, but I'm always going to be more optimistic than down in the dumps. And that's, like a personal philosophy, and that is a football and team philosophy. But I am having a real issue this week in talking myself into finding reasons for optimism for the rest of the season. And it's not because, again, this team is improved. There have been some big steps there, but the big issue with the inning of Southern Miss is the fact that the A-State fans have seen this exact game and this exact inning already this season. You flash back to week 3, Arkansas State was on the road at Memphis, and it was a game where it was a little bit more back and forth than Southern Miss, because actually, after 3 quarters on the road there at Southern Miss, even the broadcasters who were, one of the broadcasters was Austin Davis, who was like the most legendary Southern Miss quarterback not named Brett Favre. Even that dude was like, it's over. A-State's got this one. So after 3 quarters, everybody was calling it for A-State. And then A-State just went into meltdown mode. And I had a list the other day. I went through and looked at all the things that just happened in the fourth quarter. Because again, it was a 19-7 advantage. And it was a spectacular breakdown offensively, defensively, and special teams. Offensively, all of a sudden the team just could not run the football, which that was a struggle all Saturday night. But you had 60 yards rushing in the third quarter. You had -6 in the fourth quarter. There were some significant penalties. There were 4 penalties in the fourth quarter. There were a couple of, I just went blank, a couple of sacks allowed. The defense started giving up some chunk plays. Special teams, which is a incredibly, incredibly sound unit all across the board for Arkansas State football, allowed their biggest punt return of the season by the opposition. There was a delay of game on a field goal attempt that backed them up, got them out of field goal range. There was hesitation on a kickoff return that probably cost them about 5 yards of field position. I mean, if you could have an issue, you had an issue in the fourth quarter. And flashing back to a game that I'd already referenced, and sorry, I'm on like a monologue here. So
no, by all means,
I know you didn't want this.
Go ahead.
We're looking to learn. We're looking to learn.
You flash back to week 3 against Memphis, and that game was a little bit more back and forth than this one. But you get to the end of that game, and Memphis goes down and scores, and I think it's a 37-31 game. So it's a situation where you need a touchdown to win, but it's feasible, especially with the way the defenses have played that game. So with 2 minutes left, A-State gets the ball back. 2-minute drill. All right, you got a good quarterback. You go down the field, you win the game. Yay, everybody drives home happy. And on A-State's final possession, you had, I don't remember what happened on first down, but all of a sudden you had a false start, and then you had another false start, and then you had a sack, and that sack was a strip sack. That was a fumble. So you go from, it was like 2nd and 5, and then all of a sudden it's 2nd and 10, and then it's 2nd and 15, and then you turn over the ball, and Memphis has it like at the A-State 8, and so immediately they get in the end zone. Saturday at Southern Miss goes up 20-19. There's 2 minutes and 6 seconds left on the clock. You're in the exact same situation, with the exception of the fact that, this time you could walk away with a field goal and win. And just like at Memphis, you have a good kickoff return that sets you up at good field position. You have something that happens, the first down, running back, receiver, whatever. I don't even remember the play. They pick up 5 yards. So you're at like 2nd and 5. And then you get a false start. And then you get another false start. And then there's a sack. And you're just sitting there going, oh my God, I've seen this before. So instead of having a situation where your excellent field goal kicker can come in and have the game-winning kick, it's 4th and 27. And you don't have a lot of options there. And there goes the game, and there goes your win.
That's brutal.
Yeah.
You know, that is a mirror image of our game in Monroe.
It is
mirror image.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened to us in Monroe. You have a lead going in the 4th quarter. All you have to do is make 1 or 2 more plays to basically ice the game, put it away, and then you just start making we call them SIW, self-inflicted wounds. You just start making mistakes, and you keep the team in the game. And it's hard to do that on the road. But funny story, real quickly, I'm on Twitter the other night on the Rage and Review Twitter feed, and we're in a group text with a ton of other accounts around the Sun Belt, and a few Southern Miss fans came in and are like, oh, well, we're going to be 2-10 on the year. This game is horrible, and Will Hall needs to reevaluate this team, blah, 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 blah. And then I had actually had the chance to watch the 4th quarter and saw the comeback by Southern Miss. And I remember commenting after jokingly, like, you bunch of bandwagon fans, I swear. But I was very surprised just watching it, because I turned it on like early in the 4th quarter. I didn't see Arkansas State score 19 points. So I'm thinking the game's over. Let's see if Southern Miss can make it a game, or is Arkansas State just going to put it away? From what I saw in the 4th quarter, it looked, you could have sworn without looking at the scoreboard that Southern Miss was up by 4 scores.
Yeah.
So it's very surprising here. And I'm glad you were able to kind of give us a little insight on what was really going on, because I was thrown off by that in the 4th quarter as well.
Quick note on that. Tip your cap just a little bit to Southern Miss. They actually made a quarterback change at the very end of the 3rd quarter. And their very first drive with the new quarterback that came in, a walk-on quarterback, did not go well. And then, you know what? They kind of did a snap and clear, and they moved on from that. And while he was not, you don't look at any stats. That was an ugly game. You don't look at any stats from that game. You're like, this person had a magnificent performance, because he didn't necessarily when he came in statistically. However, he did enough to get his team the win. So, you credit Will Hall there for making that switch and for bringing in the guy that was able to spark his team and get a W.
Yeah, and I think Will Hall's going to get that thing turned around. They believe in him there. They're recruiting well. They're working the portal. They're doing everything you need to do. The game that I was going to ask you about was the Old Dominion game. Similar to in closeness of score, similar to the game we just spoke about. You guys went on the road. You play ODU. You basically dominate in every statistical category offensively. You had more yards. You obviously had more passing yards. You had over 100 yards rushing, where ODU had 51. Wow. Yeah. You had almost double the first downs. You totally dominate offensively. Time of possession, almost 40 minutes. What happened there? That seems like a perfect recipe for Arkansas State football to go out and win a ball game on the road. That's this statistical box score blows my mind. Can we get into that? And you almost, you had 5 yards of play. You dominated offensively.
Well, Arkansas State so far this season, in the big picture, has done an excellent job in terms of taking care of the football. Turnovers have been limited. James Blackman has been picked off once. There have only been a couple of fumbles, but I swear to God, every single one of those turnovers has came in the 4th quarter. So you flash back to that ODU game, and there was a fumble late. There was a fumble. There were 3 sacks allowed in the 4th quarter. So it was hard to keep drives going when, you were consistently losing yardage on sacks and tackles for loss. There was additionally 4 penalties late in that game for Arkansas State with 8 minutes left on the clock. And so you just see this team melt down in the games. And I don't know what the fix is there. I'll be honest with you guys. I've barely looked at Raging Cajun stats so far this week, because nothing scares me right now with A-State football more than its ability to beat itself. There's no competitor you could throw at this team right now that would make me nervous more than what's going on with this team internally.
Basically, how are you going to finish the game? We went through that for the first 4 or 5 games. And I'll turn it over to Jerry. He's going to ask you a couple of questions about the offense. But man, but the more we talk, the more I realize that we have some of the same problems. It's like looking in the mirror a little bit.
Yeah, Kara, I'm a little curious about the Arkansas State offense. I've always known Arkansas State's run a spread for as long as I can remember, at least probably, I want to say, Hugh Freeze era, probably before that. And they've always kind of run that same offense, kind of like the Cajuns have kind of run a more balanced attack, run balanced attack. I pulled up some stats. I was kind of interested in the fact that it looks like Arkansas State is more of a pass-heavy offense. I noticed outside of Grambling, they really haven't gotten much of a run game. Their top 2 running backs are averaging around 50 yards. But at the same time, I've noticed, on the other hand, you've got James Blackman at quarterback. Looks like he's a stud based off of the stats. 69% pass completion rate, 11 touchdowns, 1 interception. He's thrown for almost 1,700 yards. What can we expect as Cajun fans going into Saturday as far as the offense? Is Blackman pretty much like the bread and butter of the offense? Does the offense basically revolve around him? How well do they spread the ball around from their receiving core? I noticed their top 3 receivers look like they have some pretty decent stats. What kind of game plan, if you're looking at the Cajun defense, should they plan for facing this offense on Saturday?
Well, a lot of that is going to be due to health. And unfortunately, Butch Jones plays that really close to the vest. And the depth chart has been the same since week 1, which it's not been the same guys going out there. So there's a couple of things going on right now with the offensive line that are a little bit concerning that, of course, have such if you have issues there, like it significantly, obviously impacts your entire offense and your game plan and everything else. This team wants to run the ball. At the beginning of the season, they could a little bit. In fact, you flash back to last year, Arkansas State had 4 rushing touchdowns total. And I think they've already tripled that number this year because they have been able to run it a little bit better, but they haven't necessarily been able to run it more efficiently. It's more quantity than quality, I guess you could say, with the run game right now. And one of the big reasons for that is because for the second year in a row, Arkansas State lost its starting right tackle in Robert Holmes. He went down, I think, game 4 last year with the right knee tear, and went down this year, game 3 with a knee. So it's just a brutal situation there, more for him than anything else. Like, his fans will get over it, but you hate to see the same player go down with the same thing at the same time, 2 years in a row. I can't imagine the mental work you have to do to come back from that, let alone the physical, obviously. So ever since he's been down, it's been a little bit of just trying to figure out what the best mix is there on the offensive line. This entire A-State team is incredibly, incredibly young. I think there's 73 freshmen on the roster, and all in all, it's like 80% underclassmen. So while you technically have depth in terms of bodies at every position, including the offensive line, you don't have depth in terms of experience. So there are multiple guys on that line this year that are playing their first season of Division I football. And so trying to replace a guy like Robert Holmes, who started his career at UConn and then played a couple years at Austin Peay and then has been at Arkansas State, and trying to replace him with a guy who literally has played 0 collegiate football, that's a big adjustment. So they've tried to do some things differently there, but the run game has gone how the line has gone, and it's been kind of inconsistent. On the flip side, back to James Blackman, who I haven't even brought up yet, he's doing so many good things, and it's kind of interesting to watch how he's his metamorphosis, because if you go back to his days at Florida State, man, he was all about he just cannon, just throw it down the field, which he's got a great arm. But Arkansas State this season has done a lot more of the short game. There hasn't been just a significant amount of explosive plays, even in the past game, even with some great receivers. So he's kind of these guys have kind of nickel and dime their way down the field, consistently move the chains, but it's been a different, more methodical, more business-like James Blackman this year. One of the reasons for that is also kind of a little bit health as well. I don't think A-State had its top 2 receivers both healthy, both on the field at the same time until maybe either game 5 or game 6. So you had a little bit of an issue there in being able to get your playmakers healthy. So health has just had a lot to do with this offense this year. So in theory, they want to run the ball. In theory, they've definitely got some playmakers at wide out. It just depends on how everybody's feeling on Saturday.
Again, mirror image of our offense. Same thing. Trying to find identity, replacing a lot of key starters, lost some guys to the portal, lost some guys to graduation, O-line, 4 new starters this year. So yes, we can totally relate to that. I did have one more question on the offense, Kara. I looked at some of the Arkansas State scores this year, and really they've scored some points, even against Ohio State. I mean, I know they only scored 12, but I'm sure they made it a little bit of a game for a little while. And of course, Ohio State being Ohio State, they probably pulled away later. But even in their losses, they seem to still get in the end zone. Would you say, even in spite of all of their deficiencies that you had mentioned, are they more of a kind of an up-tempo offense, or are they kind of one of those types of offenses that they're like you said, they're methodical, but it's just more of a slow moving up and down the field, dink and doink? What can we expect as far as watching them? Do they run a no huddle? Like what type of tempo do they run? And what can we see on Saturday?
I wouldn't classify this as like an all gas, no breaks type of situation where they're just constantly flying to the line after every possession. But it's not like it's not one of those offenses where you're just yelling at your TV to snap the ball already. It's kind of it's going to lean more towards the high pace, but it's not going to be, again, the game's not going to be going so quickly that you reach down to type out a tweet and you miss 3 plays. So it is on the faster end, but again, it's not a breakneck pace. I do feel like, with the offense, they have done a fairly good job again of moving the chains. They've got a lot of guys that are there to help pick up those kind of middle distance, across the middle catches. Phenomenal tight end that everybody's going to have to keep an eye on, not just this year, but in the future as well, by the name of stAte Traore. That's kind of the difference maker right now on offense. And he's going to be somebody that gets targeted a lot, especially on third down. If you have those third and long situations, man, tight ends are always open. He's always open. He's going to make some big catches.
So, Kara, I want to kind of turn it over to defense now, because defense is my baby. I love watching defensive plays. First of all, I just want to say this feels like the game of the movable object versus the stoppable force, because you guys are ranked 83rd in defense. We're 115th in offense. So that'll be interesting to watch next weekend. But you talked about defensive breakdowns, especially later in the game. And in watching the game last week, your defense for most of the game put you guys in a position to win. And you forced 2 fumbles and you're +2 in the turnover battle. So you're thinking you're going to cruise into the fourth quarter, like you said. And then they allow, we're ahead. You're ahead by 12. You allow 13. So do you think that was more defensive breakdown on depth? Was it just boneheaded plays? Was it play calling? Kind of what's your take on that fourth quarter and how the defense just totally broke down?
Yeah, I kind of evaluate the defense a little bit differently than the offense, because of just how god awful, very bad, no good last year was. You're looking at statistically in 2021, one of the historically bad defenses in college football. Go back and look at, the points per game, go back and look at the yards per game that were allowed. It's just insane. They're numbers that I just genuinely cannot wrap my head around. So what you wanted to see from the defense this year was you just needed some kind of improvement, getting to average, which they're not quite there yet. You weren't even looking to try to get to average or get to good. You wanted to get to slightly below average. That was the bar this year for the defense after last year. And they're there. There's just been so much growth there. And I know you look at that fourth quarter and you see some missed tackles and you see a couple explosive plays allowed, which was a ginormous Achilles heel last year. And it's easy to kind of point at the defense, but this is still, 13 points a quarter every quarter last year was kind of the MO for the first 6 weeks of the season. So if you have one 13-point quarter this year, you kind of just roll with it. And that's not completely giving the defense a pass. They didn't know what to make of a walk-on quarterback that they should have been able to rattle. They all of a sudden forgot how to contain Frank Gore Jr., who they've done a really good job of all season. They let a freshman wide receiver just go off. So they don't completely get off the hook, but again, you can live with a couple of mistakes from that defense, because it's less than the 10 mistakes they would have made in that same window last year.
Yeah, and look, just to build upon what you said about them being a better defense. I mean, you guys going into the Southern Miss game were ranked like 126 in defense, and you're up to 83. So I know it wasn't the win you wanted to get, but there was significant improvement, obviously, on defense for you guys through the season. So I think that better days are ahead for you guys. If we're looking at one player on defense that's going to make an impact this week, who are we looking for? What particular player do we keep an eye out for to maybe be a real impact player?
Well, you're looking most likely at Kavon Bennett. He is a defensive end, son of Cornelius Bennett, who was, pretty good at linebacker back in the day. And, this is Kavon's second year at stAte, started his career at Tennessee and played at defensive end last year. He and JoJo Azugu were like twin terrors on the end, excellent at getting to the quarterback and racking up some tackles for loss. JoJo graduated, so there's Thurman Gathers and some other guys in that role, but they, experimented actually with moving Kavon to linebacker in the offseason. And that's where he was at for most of the spring. And I think even for the first few weeks of fall camp, and then due to depth and some other things going on, moved him back to defensive end. And that's just where he should be. You go back and you look at the almost that happened Saturday night at Southern Miss. It was late there in the fourth quarter, and he managed to get to the quarterback and bat down a pass that had legit just came out of Jake Lang's hand and just inches away from being able to haul in that interception. And of course, that would have been a game changer. That would have been an A-State win had he been able to come down with it. But there's several good players in this defense. Eddie Smith in the secondary is a great player. Jordan Carmouche is, kind of the quarterback there of the defense at linebacker. But if there's going to be, if I'm betting on a guy to go out and have a game-changing play on Saturday, then more often than not, I'm going to be rolling with Kavon Bennett.
And one last question before I turn it back over to Josh. You said earlier everybody was depressed after the last game, as you unfortunately have been in a few other games this season. How do you think the team as a whole responds this week? Do you think it'll be motivation for them? Do you think at this point of the season they're packing their bags and saying, well, let's just get through the season? How do you think they'll come out next week?
Well, I'm on my phone here. And I'm not being rude. I'm not checking messages. I wanted to read you a tweet verbatim from Kavon Bennett last night, where he just put out, quote, "Red Wolf Nation, we about to make this bowl game happen. I stamped that," end quote. So, I mean, this team still believes in.
I mean,
if you're the team, how could you not? Because you've been so close, and you've seen the work that you've put in. You've seen the work that your teammates have put in. You know what you had to do to turn 3 of those games into W's. So now it's just a matter of executing it. So I do still feel like this team has the belief. The fans are just, we're still working on it.
We're fans. Look, we had a player on last week that said we take it one game at a time. We don't listen to the noise. Every game's a new day. And we forget that. We get so caught up in the drama that we're thinking our season's over, but those guys don't think that way.
No, I mean, we let our emotions get dictated by 18 to 22-year-olds for multiple months out of the year. And we're fine with that. We think it's perfectly normal and we accept it. And this is all how we live our lives.
This is very true. It's also embarrassing when you hear it like that. So, Kara, we'll get you back to your fur baby there, which, by the way, is a gigantic beast. Can you care to share his name?
That's Crash Davis.
Crash Davis. That's perfect.
So he is a big dog mixed with a bigger dog. He's Lab Great Pyrenees, and he was so exhausted by his camera appearance earlier that he's already gone to sleep.
Fantastic.
So he's done for the night.
All right, well, we'll leave you guys alone for the night. I got a couple of quick ones, and I'll let you go.
Sure.
Overall health of the roster, or do you have any key players that may not see the field on Saturday?
That's a great question because, again, Butch Jones is kind of
yeah, and I know the depth chart comes out tomorrow anyway, so I'll kind of put you on the spot.
Well, the depth chart has actually came out, and it's just he uses that as a very loose guideline. Gotcha. But the biggest, the one that of course we know is the guy that they wanted to have start at right tackle at the beginning of the season is Robert Holmes is on the shelf after a torn ACL. So that's one. He is not disclosed. He's worse than a hockey coach. Like, he won't even give us an upper body or lower body designation. I don't know what exactly is going on with right guard Jordan Rhodes and left tackle McKeelan Thomas, but Jones has been talking for weeks about how those guys are basically superhuman right now and they're playing through pain and they're dealing with stuff, which I would imagine that after about game one, every offensive lineman is playing through pain. But the fact that he keeps harping specifically on those guys makes you know that there's something going on there that they're not being 100% forthcoming with. Kavon Bennett earlier this season missed a game because of an undisclosed injury. It sounded pretty significant. It sounded like a situation there where he is playing through pain. Arkansas State backup quarterback AJ Mayer, who they've actually brought in and used a little bit in the run game. He's been in kind of a good change of pace guy. He did not travel last week. Still don't really necessarily have an update there. In terms of running backs, Johnny Lang, who is second on the depth chart, but he's also like the all-purpose guy. You know, earlier this season, he had a game where he had a rushing, receiving, and kickoff return touchdown. The week before last, he was limited, didn't really know what was going on there, but he was not active on offense. He still handled kickoff returns. I think that same game, or maybe it was the week before, there was a starting linebacker that was missing in action that we didn't really get an explanation for. Both starting wide receivers in Champ Flemings and Tavalance Hunt have been hampered earlier this season, although I feel like those guys are pretty close to 100%. And again, because of how unfreely this knowledge comes out, again, there's kind of no telling. I mean, it could be Saturday and A-State could be down 3 starters and we'll find out at kickoff.
The Sean Payton approach to the injury report is what I hear. Kara, if you end up coming down to Lafayette, not sure if you planned on making the trip, not sure how it all works for you guys in the media over there. If you do, please reach out. We're happy to tailgate, point you in the right direction for some good food and some good beverages. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for, again, joining us on short notice. We appreciate it very much. And look, a lot of this stuff, of course, we don't know. It's hard to get any information that is first of all, in the middle of a game week, somebody like you come on and talk to us about the minutia of everything that would not be known otherwise. You can't just get on the ESPN and start typing in stats and whatnot. That doesn't tell you anything. So we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And if we can do anything to help you down the road, please let us know.
Yeah, I won't be able to make it Saturday, but, you know, one of these days I'm going to be at the Teague for the A-State and Cajun series. So I hope the offer still
Smart
stands
lady.
for some food and beverages then. So I hope that's still the case. But appreciate the invite. Thanks for letting me rehash A-State Southern Miss yet again. I don't know if it's like group therapy, and I still don't know if I can talk it out enough. But thanks so much for having me on, guys.
For sure, the Teague will never disappoint. So if you come down, just let us know. Kara, Richey, everybody, thank you very much.
Thanks, Kara.
Well, see ya.
All right, gentlemen. I heard a lot of disturbing things in that in that interview. So if the strength of their defense is speed off the edges, that doesn't really bode well for us. Jerry, I see your face. That looks like terror or concern or both.
Concern, but at the same time, I think I still feel like our defense is really kind of the big caveat to keep us in the game. I mean, if the edge, if you got that defensive speed on the edge, it goes to show you that they may be aggressive on our line, which kind of scares me a little bit. It's a little concerning.
I don't know if I don't think our tackle play has been awful. I think it's in the middle. I think the guards and center and communication between the three, to me, that's where most of our issues are.
Well, what gets to me is how much closing speed do they have? Because if you notice, our biggest weakness this season, especially on the O-line, is whether it's Chandler or Ben receiving a snap, there's always somebody on the edge or a defensive end or a hybrid linebacker in their face to where they have to kind of move, shift in the pocket and force some throws or take a sack or throw the ball out of bounds. And usually in the run game, when that happens, we get stuffed at the line of scrimmage. So yeah, that's a little concerning, but I mean, it's kind of interested to see if we run that same type of passing scheme as we did last week, how fast Ben can get the ball out. And once again, you're going to have to spread the field against that type of defense.
And then we'll have to see what Ben does, his decision-making in the pocket, whether he holds on to the ball, like you said, if he takes a sack, if he moves outside of the pocket, if he gains some yards with his legs. I think if he starts running the ball, then that totally changes maybe the game plan for stopping him through the air. But our offensive line is gonna have to open some holes for us to be able to run the ball, because we can't be as one dimensional as we were last week. We got away with it last week, right? Because I don't think we nor Marshall expected for Ben to have the game that he had. But at some point, and hopefully, I don't know what Chris's status is. I don't know if he'll be back for this weekend, but
Probable is what they're saying.
so that's good, right? Because Chris can make things happen, but still, he's got to have space to be able to run, and so does Jacob, and so do the rest of the running backs. So our offensive line is gonna have to show up this weekend for us to be able to pull off a win. I know, looking at Arkansas State's record, I know, looking at the fact that they're 83rd in defense and 92nd in offense and all that makes you think that we'll run away with the game, but there's no game on the schedule for the rest of the season that I think we can take for granted. We lost to ULM. Let's not lose sight of that. So we certainly could lose to Arkansas State if we don't come out, and I think our offensive line is going to play a big part in that.
Now, to the offensive line's credit, I've noticed our pass block has gotten a lot better over the last few games. So to your point about that rush on the edge, that helps, because I do think even against Marshall last week, I thought they did a really good job protecting Ben, and I also thought that even when that edge pass rush from Marshall tried to attempt to get to the backfield, Ben did a good job kind of using some elusiveness to step into the pocket, kind of side swipe a little bit. So I think that could be a huge advantage for us if Ben is able to keep that pocket presence going and keep it consistent. At the same time, I think what worries me still is our run game. Like you said, Nick, we can't get away with being one-dimensional every week, because, teams are going to pick up on that. So it's going to be interesting to see. I know they're probably going to put 7 or 8 men in the box, daring us to possibly run. But I hope that, like you said, I hope our offensive line can keep that going with that pass block and, again, spread the field. I think this is the perfect week to spread the field.
I think that what they want to do is they want to pass. Blackman, again, he's going to take some shots, and he's going to try to exploit the passing game. But I think the strength of this defense is in the secondary. I've been saying that from game one. And what I really want to see is how Lamar Morgan approaches this plan on defense. Or is he going to get concerned? And scared is not the word. Is he going to be concerned about the big play? Is he going to start to play soft coverage? Is he going to try to keep things in front of him? If he does, I think that's not a disaster, but it might be a mistake. You got to play an aggressive style defense. That is what we're built to do. When you start trying to get these guys to play soft zone, EMU showed you when you play soft zone and you play off of receivers, regardless of what your linebackers are doing in pass coverage, it is a recipe for a disaster with regard to the pass game. I think it's a major part of this game, the defensive secondary and their plan going forward. I think we're going to get after the quarterback. I think we're going to stop the run. What are we going to do on the back end, especially in third and intermediate, third and long? What are we going to do? Are we going to back off, or are we going to attack? That's going to be something, because there's been times where we've attacked lately, but there are also times, Rice, EMU, and to a certain degree, ULM when we were tired, where Lamar decided to fall back. So I think that's important. Outside of that, I just don't beat yourself. This seems like two teams that are learning how not to beat themselves. If we go out and play like we did against Marshall, now, do I think Kenny's going to go 3 for 3, 4 for 4, and kick a 50-yard field goal? I don't expect that. It would be great if he does it, but special teams has got to be solid. You heard Kara say they have a solid unit across the board when it comes to teams. If they're going to play good, solid special teams, we got to be able to do exactly what we did last week. Flip the field, cover, stay in your lane, and then make field goals when we need it, especially in crucial situations. I thought that was the most important thing about Kenny's performance. The timing with which he made those field goals were huge. They were momentum shifters. So that's got to be big. If the offense is not going to be world beaters, that's fine. I don't need you to be a world beater. Be opportunistic. If they make it, like, for example, they're in the fourth quarter and they start fumbling the ball, or they start having an excessive amount of penalties, we've got to take advantage of that. I think going forward that's how this offense is going to make a living. We're not going to go out and bludgeon you to death, but I think that their MO is going to be, okay, you give us an opportunity, we're going to go seize it. Seize opportunities. Don't beat yourself. Be aggressive defensively. don't be afraid to get beat over the top. It's a great point that she made when he was at Florida, when Blackman was at Florida State. He wanted to just go for the home run all the time. The ACC had some pretty nasty defenses a few years ago, so maybe he was just trying to just get rid of having to read receivers. I don't really know what his psyche was at that point, but the deep ball is definitely going to be part of their attack this week. You can bet that. And you know Bush Jones likes to take chances. So I don't know. I think there's a lot to be said, but those particular points I've been thinking about, what I don't like is that they're coming off of a game that they should have won. I mean, there have been many times with the Cajuns where we've come off of games that we should have won, and we showed up pissed. Are they going to show up pissed, or are they going to show up defeated? That's another part of that psychological part. Go ahead, Nick.
Look, I think it's important for us in the fourth quarter. I think it'll all come down to the fourth quarter and us putting doubt in their minds. Because if they show any weakness in the fourth quarter and we take advantage of that, then you're putting the dagger in the heart. They're saying, oh, here we go again. So like you said, as part of the psyche, I think it's very important that if we're close in the fourth quarter and we have the opportunity to make them doubt themselves, I think that's where you need to do it. I think our defense is going to have some success, like you said, against Blackman. Now, he's going to get his yards, but one thing that, the opposite have been where Wooldridge was getting 128 yards on the ground and he lost 16 yards via sack. You're looking at Blackman that has 103 yards of rushing and 161 yards lost. So we're going to have the opportunity, just like we did last week, to get at him, make him nervous in the pocket. Now, what I will tell you is that he doesn't turn the ball over. So I don't expect that we're going to have, and maybe, hopefully, we get a turnover in the air, but I don't expect that against this team because they've been really good at being on the plus side of turnovers. But I still think we can get some pressure on him and we can get some sacks and we can make things happen on defense. So I think we're going to have a good game next week or this coming week, but I think we're going to, again, have to be good in all phases of the game that we were against Marshall.
I also think keep an eye on the secondary. Our secondary has been our bread and butter all season long, and I think they're going to be tested this weekend, mainly because Arkansas State, they've really only alluded to throwing the football. You look at Blackman's stats, again, almost 1,700 yards passing, 11 TDs, 1 interception. So they're going to throw the football. To Kara's point, Seydou Traore, I've saw his stats, very impressive. They've got 3 receivers or 4 or 5. They probably have about 5 or 6 receivers that they spread the ball around to. They look like they have some decent tight ends. So they've kind of become sort of a prototypical running gun offense because of the lack of a run game. So, of course, our secondary is going to be key. I do expect Lamar to be aggressive in the coverage. This is one of those teams you don't want to play soft coverage on because they will tear you apart. Obviously, there's a right time and a wrong time to do that. But I think if they play that, if our secondary continues to play that aggressive scheme and the way we cover, I think we're going to be fine. I think we're going to keep them off the field. And once again, it's going to go back to our offense being able to sustain drives, not make mistakes, and win the field position battle. Really, that's kind of the formula moving forward for us. Play good defense, win the field position battle, don't make stupid mistakes offensively. And so, look, Arkansas State's defense, really, I mean, yes, they've got the pass rushers and all of that. They're fast on the edge, but they've given up some significant amount of points as well. If you look at some of their scores, they've given up over 40 a few times. I mean, they collapsed against Southern Miss. And I'm not trying to down their defense. I think their defense can make some key plays. But I think there's nothing about the defense that I see off to where our offense, I feel like we're going to completely struggle unless we make mistakes. So I feel like this matchup is very crucial to us right now. You just came off a 3-game losing streak. You beat Marshall on the road. You had 3-3. You win this game, you're 4-3. You're back to 500 in conference. And then you got a 5-day turnaround against, a decent Southern Miss team, but a Southern Miss team that's beatable. So I think this game could be the start of something. I think this game can be the start of a possible run if we take care of business and don't make dumb mistakes.
Well, you have to win in front of a nice crowd on Saturday. It's going to be a fantastic opportunity to come back and continue the forward momentum. And if you want to set up a showdown against USM the following week, you got to win. You got to win on Saturday. That has to be a win. That you got to get the crowd back engaged. You got to get the fans back. To Mike's point about stAte and their history of kind of being a dirty team, Blake Anderson's not there anymore, so who knows what the culture is over there now. Butch Jones, I don't think he's necessarily known for all that extracurricular stuff. But it's a good point. You know, if they did watch the Rice film, and we do have a rivalry sometimes heated with them, if they go out and try to, you know, get our guys off their game and unfocused because they're doing shenanigans, yeah, that's something that we should be worried about. You know, I think maybe early in the year, we kind of got that reputation for reacting to that kind of stuff. I also would argue that we've righted that. So maybe something to look for. The other thing is that I think we can all agree that this is probably the best offense that we will have faced to this point. The reason I'm saying that is because we have been able to rely on the turnover. And Jerry, you mentioned the secondary. We've been able to pick off opposing quarterbacks. We've been able to capitalize on fumbles and things like that. This is going to be the best. From a passing standpoint, it's going to be the best passing offense we've been able to see this year. Can we make consistent stops? And I think we can. If we stay true to our attacking style defense, I think that defensive line is going to eat against what, you know, Kerry even said. They have some offensive line injuries and some issues. I think the defensive line is going to eat. They just continue to get better every single game. But the back end of the defense, can we continually stop a very good passing offense without turning the ball over? Because like Nick said, Blackman doesn't turn it over. Can they? I think they can. I love our secondary. I think we have one of the best secondaries in the country. And I'm not talking about G5. I think we have one of the best secondaries in the country. Go ahead, Nick.
No, I agree. But look, I'm not looking for them to stop the passing game, just like I wasn't looking for us to stop the run game last week. I think I'm looking for opposite, because we stacked the box. We knew they were going to run it at us. We knew they couldn't throw the ball downfield, and we game plan for that. And I'm looking for the opposite. I want us to dare them to run on us and get guys back in coverage and just do their jobs. I don't think we're gonna necessarily stop their run game, but I think I'm sorry, their pass game, but I think we need to, and I think we can contain it. And flipping the side to the defensive side, you have to look at the fact that Arkansas State has given up 1,000 yards of rushing and 1,100 yards of rushing and 1,700 yards of passing so far this season. Now, again, they did play Ohio State, but they do have a propensity to give up yards. So we also have to take advantage of that. I mean, 115th in offense in the nation is not good, and that's not where we need to be to continue winning games. So I hope that Ben, with one full game under his belt and a couple of other opportunities in the game, this week settles in again. He makes some smart decisions. We take what they give us, but I think we can air the ball out. But again, we have to be able to have some sort of semblance of a run game. And that, to me, is going to be the key for us this week, is whether or not we can extend drives and control the clock, because there's only so much you can do in the air, I think, against Arkansas State.
And before the USM game, Arkansas State defense was giving up almost 5 yards a carry. That's bad. Now, do I think we can average 5 yards a carry against anybody? I don't know yet. Probably not. We are just starting to be able to get the run game going. It's going to be a big part of the season going forward. We've seen the bottom. The only arrow is up. The arrow's up because it can't go the other way. Maybe this is one of those opportunities to get the run game going. And look, you're probably going to be without Chris Smith. If he suits up, he's not going to be 100%. So what can you really expect? I expect a lot from Terrence. I expect a lot from Dre. I think these guys are talented athletes. We need the offensive line to find their dog. We got to get the dog. Who's going to be the dog? Is it going to be Jax? Is it going to be Gilly? Who's going to step up and be that dog that Terry always talks about? Somebody at some point has got to block some damn body. I'm going to keep saying it. At some point, you got to find the assignment and dominate the assignment. You got to win. In order for this run game to succeed with any amount of, consistency, for God's sake, you got to start winning these one-on-one matchups, and you got to start not missing these damn assignments. At some point, somebody's got to figure it out. That's just the bottom line. There's really no sugarcoating in at this. We're half a season in. somebody's got to figure it out. Go ahead, Jerry.
And I was watching the highlights to your point, Josh, against Marshall, and I decided to kind of see some of our rushing plays, and it's simple stuff. It's simple stuff. It's how our linemen line up in their base. It's, trying to get to the second level, missing guys, missing linebackers at the second level that could make or break a long run. It's little things. And unfortunately, I don't know. I know we've talked to Terry about it a few times, and I'm hoping it can be fixed before the end of the year, but you're halfway through the season. I don't know if it can be fixed. I hope with a little more experience that there could be some improvement as time goes on, but something like that, and seeing how we're missing out on some of these key blocks, it really makes or breaks your rushing attack. If you make those blocks, your rushing attack is night and day. It's something so, and look, I'm not an offensive line coach. I can't obviously teach that, but it's something that looks so simple. I don't know how hard it is to adjust to it. I don't know if that's experience or just repetition, but we are very close in some of those assignments from our linemen. So once they get it right, I mean, it could be a lot of fun. It's just, when are they going to get it right? When are they going to start making those blocks at that second level? And how much of an impact is it going to be? And is it going to matter at that point when they do?
Getting to the second level, it sounds like a very elementary idea. But the fact
It's
of the
hard,
matter
man.
is, when you're getting your ass dominated and you get no push off the point of attack, you can't even think about the second level because you're still dealing with the nose tackle. You're still dealing with, anybody on the defensive line. Like, we got to be able to win and win quick and often so that we can get to the linebacker. Talking about the second level right now, shit, I'm just trying to pick up the guy who's trying to stunt. Somebody's doing a twist or a swim. Like, we got to be able to pick these guys up. Anyway, Nick, before we move on to midseason observations, do you have any stat that sticks out for everybody to be on the lookout for Arkansas State? Or maybe there's a unit matchup that you like going into Saturday.
Yeah, I think the stat I threw out about the them giving up 1,100 yards of rushing and 1,700 yards of passing, I think we're going to have success against their secondary offensively, again, if we continue to protect Ben. But that all depends on whether or not we open up some sort of, like I said, run game to kind of balance our offense out. The one thing that I did notice is that they have a 62% conversion rate on fourth down. They're 10 for 16 on the season. So look for that this weekend. They're not scared to take chances, even in third or fourth and long situations. They will go for it and have some success there. So that's just one thing that kind of stood out to me. But Kyle will be very excited because I know how happy he is with our defensive performance this season. We come in ranked 43rd in total defense in the NCAA FBS. So that makes sense to me. I think we have a really good defensive unit. And again, I expect us to limit the quarterback in his play this week, but I don't expect us to stop him. I think he's too good for that.
There's a reason why he originally signed at Florida State.
Yep.
And regardless of how bad they've been over the last 5-6 years, I mean, the guy was talented enough to start for Florida State. I remember watching him play. I thought he was a very talented player, just very undisciplined. A lot of that was coaching there. What a disaster that was. But I mean, this guy, you're talking about a guy that started for Florida State. That means something to me. Guy can play. He's obviously talented. So keep an eye on that. We'll move on to the midseason snapshot. Before the season started, we started talking about where we thought position groups ranked from strongest to weakest. And we thought it was a good time. We've played 6 games. We're 3-3. There's been some surprises. There's been some disappointments. A few other things mixed in that. So we wanted to revisit at the halfway point. One last point I'd like to make before we move on. Jacob made a fantastic observation about A-State. We're coming off of a mini-bye, 10-day break. A-State just played. And they played a very emotional, close game. I think that matters. Psychologically, that matters. And I do like our conditioning over most teams that we play. So moving on to the midseason stuff. And Jerry's going to, Nick, sorry, Nick, go ahead. Yeah, you got it up? Good. So these were our original, going into the season, these were our original unit rankings. And I'll go first because I'm listed first. This season has been a surprise. People were talking about winning 9 and 10 games this season. And at the end of the day, we had to eat some humble pie and realize that we were just over the top with our expectations. And that happens. We're fans. It's okay. But I think it's a healthy exercise to go back and see where you are as opposed to where you started. And my number one position group stands. I think the defensive backs have been absolutely outstanding. Even with some of those early season hiccups with some miscommunications and, I've just voiced my displeasure with Lamar and some of his scheme. At the end of the day, we've gotten it right more often than not. So I'll take the defensive back as the number one. The defensive backs is the number one unit. I think I was right on that. Where I was absolutely wrong was the wide receivers. Now, Marshall played well. In fact, played really well. I was very impressed with the unit. Maybe even enough to move them up one. But I would probably put the wide receivers middle of the pack right now because they just haven't performed. You have a whole bunch of names that were household names that we haven't heard from. I mentioned Dante Fleming having a good game against Marshall. Prior to Marshall, he was a ghost. Now, maybe he's not as healthy as we thought he was. Maybe they didn't share the health of Dante Fleming. Fine. We know for a fact that LeBlanc hasn't been totally healthy, and we haven't really heard anything about that officially. So, but he's one of those guys that has had a few opportunities, and honestly, I don't feel like he's made the best of his opportunities. So, wide receivers as a whole, Mike Jefferson has had some nice games, but he's also had some really brutal games. As a whole, I think that we've underachieved at the wide receiver, in the wide receiver room. Do I think that they're as talented as we thought they were? Absolutely. They showed it in Marshall. In fact, we didn't really feature that entire room. So I think that there's plenty of room for improvement there because we know what they're capable of. We've got evidence. So wide receivers, I'd probably put middle of the pack in the midseason. Defensive line at 3. I'm happy with it. I'm happy with defensive line as 3. I got a little bit of shit. People said the defensive line was not that good. Let's be honest, boys. Last 3 games. Last 2 games for sure, but I would say the last 3. Defensive line brought their lunch pail. We've been playing some football on the defensive line lately. So shout out to them. Good to have some guys back, like Sonny. Sonny's been wreaking havoc. We lose Weiser, who was an impact player for the first couple of games. This was some off the field stuff, but even with his absence, we've had guys like McGriff, and finally Mason Narcisse is starting to show his abilities on the field. I mean, we are stacked on the defensive line. It's just a matter of getting these guys some reps. So I'm happy with number 3 at defensive line. Number 4, tight ends. 100% agree. I might even move them up to 3. 3 or 4 is interchangeable to me right there. Tight ends have been great. Have they been featured enough? Hell no. But they've been good. They need to get more passes. I mean, look what Neal did this past week. They were great. So happy with tight ends at 4. Special teams, I mean, let's be honest. Up until Marshall, very disappointed. But I think special teams is probably where they belong because I think that's an aberration. What happened in the first 4 games of the year, 5 games of the year, that's an aberration. We know what these guys are capable of. If Kenny has found his confidence, I mean, the sky's the limit. We know what Reese is capable of. We know what teams can do. They have been disappointing to this point, but we know what they can do. They showed it in Marshall. Running backs at 6, meh. I'll probably put him at 7 and move linebackers up to 6. I might even move linebackers to 5. I think the improvement of the linebackers, like we talked to Andre Jones about, he said it himself. They've obviously been coached up, and you can see it on the field. Their pass coverage has gotten better. Their reaction time has gotten better. Everything that they're doing on the field right now is winning football. So I think the linebackers deserve a big kudos, and I would move them up from 7 to 5. Quarterbacks and offensive line, I think, are perfectly where they need to be. I thought Ben played great football. He played the kind of football that we need him to play in order to win. Really, that's all I need out of Ben. Or Chandler, whoever it is. But I think that Ben showed you can get the production that you need out of the quarterback position. And I don't think that anybody can argue that the offensive line is who we thought they were. They are who, who was it? Who was the Bears' old coach that did we are who they thought they are who we thought they were.
Late Dennis Green.
Late Dennis Green. We let him off the hook. Well, we didn't let these guys off the hook. I kind of feel bad for busting their balls every post game. But look, at the end of the day, you got to block somebody. We got to figure this thing out. But to Jerry's point earlier in the show, they have shown that they can be competent as a pass blocking group. I've seen improvement there. They gave Ben plenty of opportunity to throw the football in a clean pocket against a very good defensive line. Front 7, really, against Marshall. So there's improvement there, but I still think offensive line has been your Achilles heel. Jerry, how do you feel about your preseason predictions and where do they stand now?
So I'll move receivers down to about the middle, like you said. We saw some sparks against Eastern Michigan. I mean, they went off. It was basically a Mike Leach air raid in that second half after that rain delay. Everybody got to touch the football and it looked beautiful. But since then, they really hadn't done much. Didn't really do much against Rice. They really were non-existent against South Alabama, even against ULM. I mean, they dropped 2 touchdown passes against ULM, which unfortunately indirectly cost us the game. So I moved them down in the middle because they've been kind of pretty much the most disappointing for me, just because they haven't been getting as many touches and being as dynamic as I expected them to be with the depth and a lot of the returning key starters that were coming back after the last few seasons. But against Marshall, they showed promise. When we saw them spread the field, you had a quarterback in Ben Wooldridge who was just gone all Jim Kelly and almost seemed like a run and shoot almost. It was like a gunslinging mayhem in Huntington where everybody got to touch the football. Again, it was what we've expected all year long. They just hadn't had their coming out party till game 6. So I still put them in the middle. And like you said, Josh, I still have time for them to grow. My number 1 would be defensive backs. Everything we talked about, all of the hype, all of the experience coming back, they've held their end of the bargain. Enough said. I think Coach Lamar Morgan has done a good job adjusting with them. Again, wish he would be a little more aggressive with them at times, but do what you can. For the most part, they've played great and they played well, and I expect them to continue that momentum as the season continues. Special teams, I had them at number 3. I'd probably have them between 3 and 4. Look, I understand we've had some kicker issues, but Kenny Almendarez is coming back, and he's been on a roll lately in the last week. Especially, and that includes that 51-yard field goal against South Alabama. I hope that that's the start of something moving forward because we're definitely going to need him as the season goes on. And I also think Reese, according to Reese's standards, he said he hasn't been doing as well where he didn't catch the snap against ULM, but Reese has been doing just fine. I think when it comes to winning the field position battle, Reese has held his end of the bargain as the punter. I also think that Eric Garrett, to me, is one of the most dynamic return guys in all of college football. So he's returned 2 punts for touchdowns. I think our kickoff team and our kickoff coverages have been really good. We really haven't given up any big time returns, which has been huge. So I'll keep special teams in the top 3 or top 4. Linebackers, pretty much what I expected. I think they're very quick off the edge. I think they've been pretty physical. I think losing a few guys last year and having some guys step in, I think they've kind of had a business as usual type approach this year. So I'll keep them at number 4. Tight ends, I'd probably switch them with defensive line. I think defensive line has been kind of a surprise to me. I thought we lost a good bit. And on top of that, we've had some injuries, but we've had a lot of guys step up as of late and really have done a good job establishing some dominance on, in the front 7 against any type of rushing attack. So I'll put them at number 5 behind linebackers. And that was kind of tough to decide between linebackers and defensive line because they both played great. Quarterback, that's about where I expected it. I know both guys have really tried to create a little bit of separation as far as who could be the starter. And I know we've talked about this all year, but I still think that, right now, moving forward with Chandler's injury, hope he gets well soon. You got to go with Ben. Go with the hot hand. And there's some games where Chandler had the hot hand, like against ULM. And I know we had a big argument about this morning on a certain radio show and who should be this, who should be starting, who should be playing. But the reality is both quarterbacks have shown some sparks. But what we saw last week, Ben's the hot hand right now. Chandler still needs to recover. I think with the quarterbacks, in my opinion, I feel that both guys are capable of being starters. There's a reason why both quarterbacks are playing. There's a reason why Mike had a tough time deciding. Both quarterbacks are capable of being starters. Now, with that said, Ben is now the starter. So I put my trust in Ben and hope he gets it done. He showed he can do it last week, and let's hope he can continue to do it. And if he doesn't, then, we may have some issues there, but it's Ben's moment to shine. And I hope to see him continue this on Saturday and moving forward until Chandler heals up. Running backs, unfortunately for the running backs, I kind of keep them right there, as well as the offensive line. Running backs, between Chris Smith's injury and trying to get guys like Terrence Williams and Dre Washington in there, I think there's still a learning curve there. When you replace two guys that left to the portal, you've replaced a bunch of guys that have gone to the NFL in the last couple of years. It's tough to step in those shoes, especially when your key guy is hurt, and he's not 100% healthy. So I hope that moving forward, as the offensive line hopefully improves, that those guys can get some more touches and make a bigger impact on the rushing game, because we're not used to seeing the run game struggle. And of course, that's behind the offensive line. Unfortunately, I still have them last. They're a big time work in progress. I do see some sparks, but I just think there's a bigger void they'll have to fill and fill very soon. I think there's some things that needs to be fixed, and I don't think it can be fixed in one season. I think you have four new starters coming in. You've had some injuries before the season. You've had a lot of new faces, and you're replacing 3 offensive linemen in the last couple of years that have gone to the NFL. That's hard to fix. And then you lost another guy to Florida, who will probably most likely be an All-American. You lost another guy to Jackson State. You lost another guy to Florida. So you got a lot of new guys coming in trying to fill in those gaps, and it's shown, unfortunately. I do trust that they'll get better, but I think the only thing that'll heal that will be time. So that's pretty much my list. Like I said, I did a little bit of musical chairs moving around, but for the most part, it's pretty much what I expected outside of 1 or 2 key positions. So Nick, passing the torch to you, man. What you got?
Yeah, I'll be very quick here. I will go number 1, defensive backs, number 2, defensive line, number 3, linebackers, because those 3 units kept us in every game and gave us a chance to win. So whether or not you think, oh, well, the linebacker's this, or maybe the defensive line, whatever, 1, 2, and 3, that's my top 3. 4, I would go with tight ends, 5 wide receivers, 6 special teams, and then quarterback, running backs, offensive line. Look, we got to get better on the offensive line. 115 in the country is embarrassing to me. I'm not expecting us to put up 50 points a game, but I do expect to put up more than 25 points a game. So yeah, we got to get better offensively in all 3 phases, but I'll put all 3 defensive units number 1, 2, and 3.
Real quickly, we'll go around the horn. Give me your biggest surprise. Could be a unit, could be a player. Biggest surprise of the season at the midway point. Biggest disappointment and MVP. Nick, you go first.
Oh, man, why do you want me to go first? I don't know, man. This one's hard for me to say because every week there's somebody else that impresses me. And it's, look, every win has been a team win. Every loss has been a team loss. There's nobody that I think I could put on the shoulders of what we, of having a disappointing season up to this point. But going back to your MVP, I will talk about that. MVP to this point of the season, I will say, to me, is Ben Woolridge, because to me, an MVP is the one player that you have to have that is going to make a difference on a make it or break it season. And up to this point, to me, it was a make it or break it game that we had last week against Marshall. And he stepped up and he showed he was a leader and he made the passes he needed to make. And he ran the ball like he needed to run it. So while, I mean, he might not be the guy with the best stats on the team, or he may not be the flashiest guy that you look at and say MVP, he only played 1 game. Look, if it was reversed, if Ben was the starter and he got injured and Chandler took over and had that game, I don't care who it is. The fact that he came in for his first start and in a must-win game dominated on offense, I'm thinking that he is our MVP up to this point this season, because if he doesn't have that game, we're having a whole different conversation this week. So I'm just going to leave it at that. It's really hard for me to say who's the most impressive and who's disappointing for me, because every week it's different. There's not one player I can point to at this point in the season that I'm saying, oh, well, he's really disappointing me. I feel like everybody's impressed me at some point and everybody's disappointed me at some point this season.
Gerald Paul.
Oof. Surprises, believe it or not, I'm going to have to say Mike Jefferson. I knew coming in he was an elusive receiver. I knew coming in that he made some key plays last year, but he's kind of put the offense on his back in spite of the quarterback situation, in spite of a lack of a rushing attack. He's made some key plays at the receiver's position to where I think he's kind of the guy that I find that our offense relies on to continue the drives and keep things going. And he's kind of established himself as that. I like the fact that last week early on, if you look at the first drive, he got targeted pretty much 90% of the time by Ben, which goes to show you there's a high level of trust in him to really get this offensive side of the ball moving. So I got to give it to Mike. But I don't want him to be the key guy because I want other guys to touch the football. I want the offense to be able to start running the football. But the fact that they're lacking a little bit, I think he's kind of your go-to. So he's been kind of a surprise for me, and the fact that he's been able to put that offense on his back. Disappointments, I really don't have any disappointments per se. Like I said, we kind of knew coming in who would struggle. Now, it's ironic that I say that Mike Jefferson is a surprise because I will say if there's any unit that's been disappointing, it has been the receiving core. Really, I've complained in the beginning about how they haven't been able to create separation. If you notice in some of our losses, they were only maybe one or two guys that were targeted all night because they couldn't get open, couldn't get out of jams and the line of scrimmage, dropping passes. But again, they're getting better. So I hope moving forward, we see improvement, which we are. So I'll definitely get them out of that category if we see more of what we saw against Marshall, because I do think, as always, and we've seen this the last couple of years, our offense always tends to get better as the season goes on, whereas our defense in the last couple of years has always been good from game one. I expect our receiving core to improve, especially now that we've established Ben being the starter, and we know that he's got a great arm. I expect a lot of them to have some of that chemistry up and down the field, hopefully, especially this Saturday. Midseason MVP, I'm going to give it to Eric Guerra.
Damn it.
I got to give it to Eric Guerra. Look, he's like glue on defense. He's scored 2 touchdowns on the punt return. Anytime he gets space to return a punt, you can expect him to get at least 10 yards to 20 yards, and sometimes he'll take it to the house. I mean, his punt return kept us in the game against South Alabama. I think that makes a big difference. And look, he's just a dynamic athlete. I mean, he's one of those type of guys. He's fast. He's confident. He's just one of those type of players that can play, 5 or 6 different positions or skill positions. You want to put him in the slot on offense? He could probably do it. You want him to play running back and spread the field? He could probably do it. You want him to play option quarterback? He could probably do it. But he's really good and a safe pick at corner, and he's a fantastic return specialist. So, of course, I got to give it to Eric. He's earned that number 7. He fits in that number 7 jersey. I don't know what it is, but he just fits in it. So I got to give it to him as a midseason MVP.
Well, damn. That was mine. I think it's an easy pick. I mean, he impacts the game. He impacts the game on special teams. He impacts the game defensively. He shuts down a side of the field. He allows Lamar to be able to call that defensive scheme as aggressive as possible. So he did get kind of smoked that one time. I think that might have been against Rice. That one time that he got beat, single coverage, no safety help, but whatever. Outside of that, he's been perfect this season. Anyway, my MVP is going to be Jordan Quibido in a time where our linebackers were really learning to gel and play together, especially in pass coverage. Quibido, they put Quibido at Mike. He's calling the defense. He thumps. He's always in position to make a tackle. I'm sure he leads the team in tackles. Jordan Quibido is my midseason MVP. Biggest disappointment, I'm going to say, Marshall notwithstanding, special teams as a whole. Completely in my view, it's so disappointing when you look at a unit going into a season and you say, I gotta be able to rely on this unit because they've been so solid for so many years. And I think you said it. Reese even said himself, he hasn't played well. Kenny up until Marshall hadn't played well. I would say our coverage hasn't been good. We've made mistakes. We've fumbled the football. Special teams has been a disappointment to this point. Again, Marshall notwithstanding.
I wasn't going to say it, man, because I was so high on the special teams this year, I couldn't admit defeat.
Yeah, you had a way up there. I was expecting that.
I think
me either.
Look, I think what's so hard about special teams is the Monroe game. That sticks out like a sore thumb. If you look at every other game, for the most part, they haven't played bad outside of a few missed field goals or a few mishaps. I think what hurts about special teams is we keep going back to the Monroe game because, in my opinion, it was the special teams that lost us that game.
Well, there's no question.
if you take that out, is it real? I guess I want to ask you guys, if you take out the Monroe game, just take it out of your minds. Does special teams really play that bad?
Yes, it has been bad. The kickoff coverage has been terrible. Well, we missed an extra point. We missed outside of Marshall. I think we've made 2 field goals on the season. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, we missed some against Rice, I believe. That put us in a. We had some special teams
Blunders.
I think, yeah,
But
blunders against Rice.
let me say,
yeah.
if you have your special teams unit, I don't care which one it is, lose you a football game 5 games into the season, or no, it was 4 games into the season. That's pretty damn bad, dude. Especially it's a unit that we've been relying on. I mean, they've helped us win games. And especially, you're one of the guys saying that our formula for success is defense and special teams. So if they're going to be part of our formula for success, you got to be able to rely on them. And I'm telling you, to this point, Marshall notwithstanding, they have not been a reliable group. I'm sorry. That's the truth. It is what it is. I know a lot of special teams guys listen. They probably agree if they're being honest. So anyway, biggest disappointment, special teams, Marshall notwithstanding. Biggest surprise has been, I'll go back to linebackers. Their development in the pass game. I got on here and ranted after Southeastern and after Rice about how bad the linebackers pass coverage were, even to the point where this is per a player parent, our cornerbacks were not being able to jam guys at the line because they had to play inside leverage to help out the linebackers in pass coverage. I think that there's been a massive upgrade since Rice in that regard. I think that the linebackers have really come into their own with being able to help out in that intermediate passing game over the middle. Nobody's exploited us after, well, ULM did to a certain degree, but it wasn't consistent death by, 1,000 cuts. They ripped off a couple of big plays with Yak, but some of that was backfield or, secondary miscommunication. So I'm not putting that on the linebackers. Their evolution as pass defenders is going to be my biggest surprise. And that's kind of how I see it. I think it's kind of hard to argue with any of those picks. So, gentlemen, thank you for your research on that. We're going to move on to the recap of the league, and we'll kind of move through this because I know we're keeping you guys long. But there's just something that I got to get to, and I can't wait. We've already talked about Arkansas State and Southern Miss. Brutal loss for Arkansas State. They go into the fourth quarter. I'm sorry, Arkansas State ends up losing, but Southern Miss goes into the fourth quarter down 13 points. They reel off 13 consecutive points. Arkansas State does nothing in the fourth quarter other than meltdown, and they lose 20-19 in Hattiesburg. That's brutal. South Alabama got everything they wanted from ULM. Now, that makes me feel a little bit better about the ULM loss. Obviously, it's still a bad loss. We were the better team that night. We should have beaten them. But you got to give UL Monroe some credit for going on the road to South Al and putting up a hell of a fight. Rogers goes berserk, throws for 371 and 4 touches. I mean, that's big time. Now, Bradley also, he threw for 400 plus and 3 touchdowns, but South Alabama, they expected to win that game. And I don't know if they sleptwalked through it or what, but ULM showed up and they put up a fight. Go to Troy, Alabama. Texas State is playing real football, folks. They couldn't score a point in the fourth quarter. They're still probably learning how to win. We've talked about it it feels like 3 years that Spavital was getting it. They were finally starting to turn over the roster. They had some real commitment from the administration. It was just a matter of time before we saw results. They have all the facilities. This might be the beginning of it. They beat App State. They fight Troy to the death. I mean, that's a hell of a game. They lose by 3, 17-14 on the road in Troy. Lane Hatcher didn't play well, but he did everything he needed to do to keep him in the game. They just couldn't finish. Good win for Troy, apparently, because Texas State's on fire. Georgia Southern knocks off top 25 ranked James Madison, 45-38 in Natville. Now, that one was pretty hotly contested throughout. It was 17-14 at half, and then Georgia Southern came out in the third quarter and just started throwing haymakers. To JMU's credit, they fought back. They had a late opportunity to tie that game. Georgia Southern finishes the game. Huge win for Georgia Southern. They're now 4-3. They're above 500. People are starting to believe in Coach Helton. But, man, 578 yards through the air and 4 touchdowns for Georgia Southern. I can't say the guy's last name. Vantrease? That's absurd. That's an absurd day at the office. So anyway,
Especially for the triple option Georgia Southern.
well, I think he's trying to spread it out a little bit more.
Well,
so
clearly throwing for almost 500 yards. Yeah, I would think.
yeah. So Georgia Southern is another team to keep your eye on. We're gonna have to play them, so something to be watching out for. Obviously, Louisiana beats Marshall in a midweek game, 23-13. Cajuns really dominated that. I don't think the final score is really indicative, but the star of the show, in my view, the COVID Carolina Chickens on that stupid, ugly teal field got their asses totally kicked. 49-21. They gave up 35 points in the second half to ODU. ODU just absolutely annihilated Coastal. And I watched every glorious second, and I laughed. I scream laughed. I was howling. And I'm happy for ODU. Look, they had one of the most incredible second halves of any season I've ever seen last year to make a bowl. They come into the Sun Belt. The very first time they're on national television as a Sun Belt member, they beat Virginia Tech, one of their old rivals, or that big brother, little brother situation that they have with those Virginia schools and everything. So good for them. They're now 3-3 on the season. They have a fighting chance to get into a bowl game and maybe make some noise in the East. 49-21 at Coastal. A beatdown. My little heart was so happy.
Oh, poor
Fellas, thoughts on this week that was in the belt?
Look, hashtag Fun Belt, man. I mean, just to show you how much respect the Sun Belt is now getting for the fact for JMU to be ranked in its first year of being in FBS with a 5-0 record and 3-0 in Sun Belt. That in itself tells you, I mean, that would not have happened 4 years ago. So I think really credit to App State for raising the bar. Credit to all the schools that we've added for raising the bar. Pat on the back to ourselves a little bit for raising the bar, because we 2 seasons were being ranked in the top 25 along with App State. That just tells you the strength of the league, and I'm excited for what, again, James Madison brings to the table, Marshall brings to the table. I know they're down this year as we are, but I expect them to get right back up. Texas State might finally be turning that corner a little bit, and you look at Old Dominion. Holy cow, who saw that coming? So it just shows to the strength of the league. And that one thing I warned one of the James Madison fans, and I kind of got bashed for it, but he was bragging about their record or something, and I said, man, don't brag too hard. This league has a way to humble you, and it did real quickly.
Everybody can beat everybody. I mean, that's just a fact. And this is not like a bottom feeder league where the reason why you're losing week in and week out is just because you don't have the talent. This is legit. James Madison has been legitimately better than everybody they've played. And to the point that they've been a really good team, Georgia Southern played about as flawless of a game as you can play. And they beat them, but those are 2 good football teams. I would take both of those teams against a lot of P5s. I mean, for example, Georgia Southern beat Nebraska earlier this year. This is a good football team. A lot of these guys are good football teams.
Look, and not to mention, if South Alabama beats UCLA, they're in the top 25 right now. They're 6-0.
Isn't UCLA in the top 10 right now?
They're like 12, I think, or something
12?
like that. Yeah, 12 or 11, or they're close to the top 10. So, or I think they are in the top 10, actually. I could be wrong.
I think they're number 9 right now. Yeah.
Number 9. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you have South Alabama that literally goes to the wire against them. Should have beaten them, right? And if they win that game, they're undefeated right now, and they're probably in the top 25. So that's 2 teams right there, back to back, with JMU, that was number 25, and South Alabama, that could be top 25 teams right now. To Nick's point, what does that say about the Sun Belt Conference? That fast? That fast to have that type of talent. And look at the number of teams over the last 4 or 5 years that have cracked the top 25 from the Sun Belt. Troy, us, App State. I think Georgia Southern got votes recently or a few years back. Coastal Carolina.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. South Alabama, like right now, they should be in the top 25. They're close to it. JMU. Did I just name 6 teams right there that are hovering around the top 25? That's a lot of respect for this conference. So I think it's only going to get better, and it's going to be a grind for us to win this division. But it just goes to show you the parity of of this this conference. And I don't want to give too much away because I have something to say about that later on. But it's I tell you, this Saturday was a lot of fun. Just not besides the football outside of the conference, just inside of the conference. These games. I mean, look at some of these scores. They're mostly outside of ODU and COVID Carolina. They're all one-score games. They're all close games. Every single one.
It speaks to the health of the league. It's a good league. It's a league we can be proud of. It's a league that I'm constantly checking scores to see who's doing what. Can't say that 5 years ago. Can't say that 10 years ago. Just can't. Didn't have the pride. Didn't have the buy-in from the other fan bases.
No.
We've got a healthy league, and it's something to be happy about. So if you're not paying attention to Sunbelt football, you really need to be.
Man, I tell you what.
All right, here we go. So, man, I tell you what, last Wednesday night, that was the team that we all expected to see from game one. We had an offense that lit it up and down the field. We had a defense that flew to the ball left and right. And we had a special teams that consisted of a kicker who looked like a Lou Groza candidate and a punter who does what he does best, help us win the field position battle. Put all of this together, and you have a Cajuns victory at Marshall on national television. Now, might I add that the Cajuns went in as double-digit underdogs. But this is just a small part of the chaos that we now see in the Sun Belt Conference, as we just talked about. Let's call it a game of musical chairs. Now, as I sat back this past Saturday and enjoyed watching some good college football, I could not help but witness the parity that our conference is now going through. I got to see a 2-3 Old Dominion team go into Conway, South Carolina, and just dominate 6-0 COVID Carolina. I got to see a 3-3 Georgia Southern team defeat nationally ranked Sunbelt and FBS newcomer JMU at home in a shootout. And who could forget the big head scratcher a week ago when Texas State gave App State its third loss of the year before the halfway point? All of these games in the Sun Belt Conference lead to one simple fact. You really never know what will happen next. And that, my friends, ironically, plays right into the hands of the Cajuns. Now, how's that possible? See, as we sit here with a 3-3 record, we might look back at the losses and scratch our heads wondering how in the world did we end up here? Yes, that Marshall win was very satisfying, but it also brought out the what ifs. What if we had converted that third and fourth down in Rice territory in Houston to take the lead late in the first half? What if we score the go-ahead touchdown up by 10 points in the third quarter up in Monroe? What if we get one or two more offensive drives going in the second half at Cajun Field and make a field goal or two more against South Alabama for homecoming? All of these hypotheticals that make us wonder where we would be in the standings of the Sun Belt if some of these scenarios would have indeed come true. But the game of football can do that to you. As much as it can giveth, it can also taketh away. And for us, we're learning what it's like to be on the other side of what used to be favorable results. Now, we can only control what's ahead of us. And that starts with one team, Arkansas State. Arkansas State comes in with a record of 2-5 after a heartbreaking loss to Southern Miss this past Saturday night. I'll say what you want, but no matter the record, Arkansas State has always been a tough challenge for us, and I expect no different this weekend. Here's another scenario for you, and please excuse me if I tend to get ahead of myself. Let's say we win this weekend. That will make us once again over 500 with a 4-3 record and a showdown in Hattiesburg 5 days later. Win that game, and now you're 5-3 before coming home for 2 weeks against Troy and Georgia Southern. And at worst, if you split those two games, now you're 6-4 and you're suddenly bowl eligible. My point is this. We can harp on the coulda, woulda, shoulda. We could talk about what happened in that 3-game losing stretch. But the reality is that we still control our destiny on what's ahead. Meanwhile, look no further than this Thursday night when Troy travels to South Alabama for a Western Division showdown. A Troy win would add to the Western Divisional chaos. Follow that up with 2 straight road trips for South Alabama to Arkansas State and Georgia Southern. That can go either way. Basically, what I'm saying is at this point, anything can happen. And to be honest with you, that's what makes it fun. It adds to that conference parity that no team can be overlooked, and it makes it even more important for the Cajuns to not do what I just did and look ahead. Because after all, I get away with it because I'm just a fan. That's why I'm here. But man, I tell you what, for the Cajuns, only one goal lies ahead of us: beat Arkansas State. The rest, hopefully, will take care of itself. See you Saturday, Cajun Nation, for some conference musical chairs.
Nicely done, Jerry. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you've just heard, if you like what you've just seen, please hit that subscribe button. Smash that like button. Tell a friend, a few of them. We'll be back for the post game Saturday afternoon. Remember, 4 o'clock game will be a little bit earlier, probably around 8. Immediately following the game, we'll be here to holler and scream with you. It is a blackout game. Please remember that. Not enough pub about that, but wear your black. Go out there and raise hell. We need a good crowd. We need to get this W on Saturday. For Jerry, for Nick, it's been another fun one. Oh, and for Kara Richey, by the way, a fantastic guest. Appreciate you all listening. See you Saturday night. Go Cajuns.